those are the regrets I had in my life. That I just wish I would have gotten from it and been informative, introduced them, showed them, what the effects could possibly be. Tell them, and have these conversations, like real conversations, face to face, around the table. And I think that's the way I should have approached it.
So I think it's safe to say that as a parent, you've got a lot of fears. You got a lot of things on your mind when you're raising your kids. Would y'all agree with that?
Yes.
A lot of things go across your mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Strangers, what foods to eat,
health,
how to discipline them, do you spank? There's a lot of things that go into your mind when you think about your kids. And one of the main things that I think about constantly, especially with the way things are going, is drugs. Mm-hmm. And how I'm going to approach that discussion with my kids. When am I going to start talking about it? How much am I going to expose them to the discussions? What am I going to try to learn about it beforehand? How proactive am I going to be? These are all things that are circling my mind, because when you look at it, and I've got it written down here, so far 18 states have legalized marijuana. And we're going to put marijuana into the drug discussion. We can debate whether we think it's that serious or not, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, drugs in general are starting to be more accepted, at least marijuana and alcohol. And like I said, right now, 18 states have legalized marijuana. 5 states have it completely so 5 states where it's completely illegal. That's it. The rest of the states either have some sort of medical or it's completely legal. So only 5 states have stuck to their guns about it being completely legal. So that got me to thinking, okay, if that's the way we're starting to head. Now, I'm not saying, just because you legalize marijuana, you're going to jump to legalizing cocaine. I'm not saying that. But it's starting to become more of an accepted thing where marijuana is just not that big of a deal.
Right.
And again, maybe it's not that big of a deal. But what does it lead to? These are the things that are constantly on my mind. So what I want to know and what I want to discuss today is how, as parents, we all 3 have young kids. Mm-hmm. How are we going to approach this discussion? Darren, you've already raised 3 kids and been through this once. Yeah. You're getting another chance now with a 5-year-old. I'm curious how you're going to change things, how you're going to approach it differently, maybe with things that you did well the first time. But before we get there, what I want to know first is, how were you guys raised in regards to drugs? What were you told? What did your parents tell you? What were the conversations? Did they not say anything at all? How did that look for you guys growing up?
For me, it was fear. It's fear-based. My mother, I was around alcohol and drugs all my life, especially as a young kid. I was seeing needles on the ground, heroin, crack cocaine. I can remember the day crack cocaine hit the streets, man. Not actually the actual day, but I remember the effects of what crack cocaine looked like. I'm talking about working class people that had jobs that were hitting crack, no jobs, lose their families. I mean, it was just so impactful. So I grew up more so on the fear side, and I have uncles that were in the drug game that drank a lot at the same time. I just saw the true effects of the game. And my mother was big on the introduction. So my mother made the introduction as far as, how alcohol could damage your life, how big it was. And people, this is before, even we talk about the drugs and about marijuana and crack cocaine and all this other stuff. Alcohol probably was the worst drug in the neighborhood, because it was a liquor store right directly across the street that everyone frequented, right? So I was introduced at a young age about the effects of what alcohol could do, and I saw those effects. And then she talked to us about marijuana and the effects of, and back then in Phoenix, that you went to jail. There was no pass go. You had marijuana on you. Didn't matter how much you had, you went to jail. Mm-hmm. And I saw a lot of people go to jail through that process. So I was introduced at a young age of the effects.
When you say young age, how old were you when your mom started bringing it up?
7, 6, 7, 8.
When your mom started actively talking to you about it?
We had conversations early on.
Okay.
Early on.
God, that's 2 years for my son.
Yeah.
2 years from now. That seems so young. But to your point, you were around it. You started seeing it. If she didn't teach you the streets, we're going to teach you.
Yeah, and it's just the opposite. And we can get into it about how I raised my kids, which I have so many regrets, but we can talk about
Tyler,
that.
what were the discussions like for you with your parents regarding drugs specifically, drugs and alcohol?
Absent. Yeah. So I would say I was probably the opposite. I lived early on in a, suburban area alcohol. My parents barely drank. I mean, I maybe saw I remember I saw my dad at my grandma's one time drink a beer, and I thought it was like the biggest deal. Saw him drink one. They'd have like a glass of wine every once in a while, but I never saw him drink. But then I had cousins who got arrested early on for selling weed. And that was the first time, but my parents never talked about it. My mom was a Baptist pastor's daughter. And my dad, just from his family dynamic, it was just kind of just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Just kind of let it go. So I never had those conversations with my parents about drugs and because it wasn't really around me. So totally opposite from that. So I learned from kids at school, from secondhand knowledge. So I was super uneducated about it.
Yeah, I was the same way. My exposure to it was middle school, the kids at school. But my parents, and sorry, Mom and Dad, if you ever did try to talk, I don't remember them ever bringing up the drug conversation.
Yeah.
Alcohol they did. In fact, when I was in 7th grade, I'll never forget this. My dad went and bought one beer from the convenience store and let us all try a sip of it. I thought it was the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted. I never picked it up again until I was 21.
He still makes that face when he drinks.
I do. I really do. So for me, that actually worked because I was like, I don't ever want to try. Why would somebody want to drink this? It's disgusting.
Right.
So, but I don't remember an active conversation about drugs ever. So my exposure, like you, Tyler, was when I went to middle school and started hearing kids getting high and.
Well, it was bad, right? You see
Right.
TV, you see the news, you knew about it, right? You knew that it was
but
bad.
there was no active conversations at home.
That's right.
That I remember at least.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really proactive. Now, luckily, for me and my parents and my brothers, none of us ever got into it. So they kind of escaped that a little bit. They didn't have to ever approach it. Because for me, and then my next question for you guys is, okay, that's how your parents approached it, but what was your opinion on drugs early on?
Trouble.
Yeah.
Like addiction. I saw the addiction side of things, whether it be, I'm lumping alcohol into this.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
Controlled substance.
For sure.
So, yeah.
I saw the addiction side of this. I saw my Uncle Sam was, he dealt drugs all his life. I saw weed in bags, like by the poundage. So I've seen that situation, but I've also had to walk and see him in prison behind the walls because of the drug use and the drug, and the drug dealing. So I've seen that. I seen my best friend at 19 go to prison because he was slinging drugs. So it's been around me, and it's always been to me, it's always been, okay, if I do this, this is what's going to happen. And I don't know about you guys, but I'll be damned if I go to jail, dude. I mean, that's not, that didn't play in the cards. Going to prison and alcohol, and I saw it. It's like alcohol, this leads to that. And I just wanted to be as far away as possible.
So you didn't really need a discussion. You saw it firsthand.
I saw it firsthand.
You forget we did though, right? We had Dare.
Yeah.
Remember?
DARE.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but it was a very different conversation. It was not a scare tactic, but it was scaring you straight, essentially, like how bad it is and how awful it is, and school events and all and everything was about how bad it was. So my opinion of it was just like, dude, it ruins your life, right? You see the before and after pictures that Dare would show you, right? And like, why would anyone touch that? Yeah. So that worked for me, but unlike Darren's, I didn't see it around me every day. I didn't live with it, and I didn't have family and neighbors and friends that as
totally
terrible
effective
as it is, but that's my livelihood. Like that's the only way that I feel like I can make a living in my current situation. So it's very different, very different than what you, but you had the motivation, the work ethic, the wherewithal to say, okay, hey, look, at an early age, because of the conversations I had with my mother, that I'm not having any part of that. I have a passion, and I'm all in on that.
Yeah. And my mom had no choice but to have those discussions with us because she knew we were seeing them.
Right.
we were seeing those.
You had to grow quick.
Yeah, and I'm the youngest. I'm the baby, and I had, a sister and 2 brothers who were like, "Hey, don't you ever? I'll kick your ass if you're around so and so. If you're hanging with." I mean, we had guys that come in the neighborhood, and you're like, "No, you don't run with them." Like that's an ass kicking for you.
Yeah.
If you even think about hanging out. So I kind of knew the game and understood, like, if you want to go down that road, then it's life or death. And
so you had a lot of detractors of why you shouldn't do it. Was there anybody close to you that was trying to encourage you?
No.
Maybe a friend that was like, "Hey man, try this." Nothing like that.
Well, look, I've had people always trying to sell drugs to me my entire life. But I just didn't have anyone because most of the people that were drug dealers, they knew I was an athlete, and they knew that that was most of the time it's almost like who's smoking or who's doing crack or whatnot. But if you know a guy, you respect him, and you see him, you're like, he's not. That's not.
That's so interesting.
I was gonna say that's
not
such a
his
cool.
deal.
I mean, cool, but like recognize like this kid's got a shot.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna stay away from him.
Yeah.
Like
I'm telling you,
Like it's okay for me to do it because
Yeah.
I'm not an athlete, but don't dude, you don't.
Yeah.
It's not for you. That's such a
Yeah,
fascinating mentality.
And look, man, I'll tell you this, I am no saint. Like I can remember I smoked weed when I was in high school. Like, hey, we dibble-dabbled here and there.
So why did
Yeah.
what so you just went through all these reasons of why you shouldn't have done it. Why did you still end up doing it?
Because I wasn't, I don't know, like you get to a point where like weed, I was informed. Like I'm not a drinker. I couldn't drink much. So weed was like, I saw weed so much that I was like, this is not going to affect me that much. I'll take a hit of weed. I'm not going to smoke every single day. I'll take, my sophomore year, I hit a couple joints with a couple buddies, and I was like, oh man, this ain't as bad as they thought. But I couldn't partake. Like I wasn't like all day, every day smoke weed. It just never took me over in that sense. But I was no saint. I watched my buddy, my best friend, bag it up, package it, send it out, sling it on the streets. I saw the effects of him making a ton of money and the effect that it was having on a lot of people. So I'm no saint to sit there and say, hey, I didn't do this and do that. I saw it firsthand what it looked like. I just didn't go down that path.
Yeah, and I think it's tough, right? Because at that age to have the wherewithal, because my opinion of it in high school is very different than talking about weed, like marijuana, it's very different than it is today. Very different. But it was that scared, like if I do it, my life is over kind of thing. Like I'm gonna get hooked to coke, and then I'm gonna get into heroin, and then my life's over. Like that's the steps, right? That's what it was. And I was opposite of that. And even in the alcohol, like I stayed away from everything.
Right.
Now I had an image that I created in my head that I had to live up to. So I could never drink. So I was at parties, but I was the kid in high school that if Tyler wasn't there, then their kids couldn't go, specifically girls, right? Because they knew, okay, he's going to at least be responsible.
You were a square.
I was a square, 100%.
Me too.
But here, the thing
Still
was,
are.
Shocker.
the thing was, I was always at least like cool and collected when the cops inevitably showed up to every single one of the parties. And so it was in high school for me, it would have been very different had I gone that way. But I was like the student body president. I was like quarterback of the football team. I was all these things that like I built up in my head that I had to live up to. And so I never did any of that, which later on, like in college specifically, right, you overcorrect. And then drinking in college was totally different.
Right.
Like, because I just never experienced it. And it was like, that what's that, white girl wasted for like 5 years straight. But like it was very, but weed to me, it was early on, and partly because I was uneducated, there wasn't a ton around. And I think it was early on too, right? Because when I was in high school, all there was weed and alcohol.
Yeah.
That was it.
That was it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I leave, I mean, shortly thereafter, that's when pills got introduced. And
See, I never went through that. I was way further beyond that.
Now we're talking about the opioids, right? Like that, and it was really my age, my grade was the first that started to like dabble with it, like kids in my class, like my senior year. And then, and I even was like, there was one point I was like, oh, maybe I should, I'm not drinking. So maybe I could, maybe I could take a couple oxys or I could take a couple of those. I never did, but it was like one of those things. And then, dude, it went off the deep end. I had 4 or 5 friends that ended up in jail for multiple years because they ended up getting hooked, and then they robbed pizza delivery guys for pennies and change, and it was bad. But that was the only 2 things that I had to deal with. Like I really don't envy the kids today.
Right.
The amount of things that they're exposed to and have access to is so much more vast than when I was in high school.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a little bit. I'm like you, Tyler. 2 things that I had going for me as far as not falling into the drugs or alcohol was, number one, I was so scared of doing anything, just getting in trouble in general. But also, I've always been weird about putting things in my body that make me act a certain way, a different way than what I normally act. And that can be anything, right? I've just always had a fear of not having control.
Yeah.
So that was number one. I was just scared to get in trouble. But number 2, none of my best friends did anything. In fact, I didn't go to my first party until I was in college, literally. Didn't go to a single party in high school. Didn't go to
because you weren't invited,
well,
or because
that might have been it. I guess by default I didn't ever have it. No, but seriously,
same difference, Tyler. I didn't go.
The point is, I didn't go. No, but it really was a blessing now that I look back that none of my best friends partied. None of them smoked weed. None of them drank. And it was never even an issue for me because it was I wasn't around it.
And do you look back and say, "Hey, I missed out because I wish I would"?
Not at all.
Exactly.
Not even a little bit.
Exactly.
I don't have any I still don't, to this day. I'm 33 years old. I still don't have a desire to go get hammered,
Right.
or go drink alcohol, or go get smoked. Like, it just doesn't appeal to me. Not that I have anything against the people that do it. Do what you want.
Right.
Me personally, it's not a desire of mine.
You mentioned something that I can definitely go back to is the fear that I had. Like when I did smoke weed, I would never go anywhere. I smoked it like, in my alleyway behind. It was like a garbage can. And me and my buddies would tote on it and then go back, and I could not leave the house.
So what drew you in though to the weed? Like, did you hear like, oh, it makes you feel really good? It cures anxiety.
It makes you feel good. It took, is an escape. Made me laugh. Like the first time I smoked, and it was just like a little small blunt of weed. First time I smoked a joint, I was like, it has no effect, like 0 effect. So I was like, what's the big freaking deal? I'm with my buddy Keith, and we, maybe we had the cheapest weed. It's probably what he weed. It's probably grass and stems, but so nothing happened. I didn't have any effect.
Yeah.
And then another buddy came through like months later. I still remember this.
Sticky icky.
And I could not stop laughing. Like that was the time where I was like, okay, this is what it does. All right. So I sat there, but I still was so paranoid. My mom wasn't home. I couldn't go anywhere because I wanted to be in control. So I was a home guy who smoked. Like I smoked and I went home and then watched a movie or something like that. But I couldn't get out in public. And then alcohol was something I just didn't. I used to see how people would act with alcohol and how bad it was. I mean, the effect of what I saw was what really scared me away from alcohol.
Yeah, so I guess that's the scary thing, and maybe scary is too strong of a word, but you had every example, every reason, every discussion in the book.
Yeah.
Don't do this.
Yeah.
And you still did it anyway.
Yeah.
So that to me is what makes me nervous going forward. Because Tyler, you said it a second ago, our kids, it seems to be that they're more exposed to it these days. It's more accepted, like I said, especially marijuana, more accepted states legalizing it. Alcohol has always been something that hasn't seemed like that big of a deal, even though to me it's one of the more difficult things to get involved with.
Yeah.
And then obviously your harder drugs. But a couple of stats for you guys that'll, I guess, maybe scare you a little bit as well. 1 in 20 8th grade students reported using alcohol, marijuana, or illicit drugs in 2018.
1 in 20.
1 in 20 reported, meaning
admitted
to it.
Right.
So how many didn't admit to it? 1 in 20. That's high to me. On average, kids tried drugs for the first time between ages 13 to 15.
Correct.
Okay. And the last one, research shows that people who drink before the age of 15 are 4 times more likely to become addicted to alcohol later in life.
That's amazing.
4 times more likely if you drink before the age of 15. So why do I bring up all that? It's because of the discussion we want to have here in a second. How are we going to approach this with our kids? At what age are we going to start talking to them about? Because that stat just said they start trying it when they're 13 years old, which means you better start having discussions that maybe 6 years old isn't too early. Maybe 8 years old isn't too early. I mean, you start getting 10, 11, 12, they may have already been offered it at some point.
So one of my biggest regrets, and let's go down that road.
Just a second before we get there, we do want to give a shout out to Choctaw Casino and Resort. I was driving down here, and
stole your show.
No, there's no easy transition. Sorry, Ty Bones. I was driving down here. I saw the billboard. This week, this week that this podcast goes live, is their grand opening.
Oh.
This is their grand. We've been talking about it for months.
Yes.
We've been ranting and raving. You got to go see it. You got to go see it. This is the week. And as part of this, in August, every Saturday they're giving $1.8 million away this month. And so every single Saturday they're giving money away. So go to the website, Choctaw Casino and Resort. Check out the new expansion. Grand opening was this week. But back to what we were talking about a second ago. So, Darren, when you think about listening to those stats, 13 years old, how are you going to approach it with you, Dad? You said you didn't do it right the first time.
I didn't do it right. Let's go back to that, though. I need to go because I got a 28-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 20-year-old. And my oldest son, DJ, I'll tell you right now, and it's the difference is this. I wasn't, much like what Tyler said earlier, look, I was playing in the NFL. I'm living in the suburbs. I wasn't around it. I didn't see drugs every day. We didn't drink that much alcohol in my house. We just didn't have those things, and it wasn't present. So I wasn't having those conversations
out
with
of sight,
my
out
kids.
of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. And my son's going to Trinity Christian school and private school and doing all these things, and I'm not. I mean, the conversations weren't had.
So knowing what you know now, when would you have that conversation with him?
Probably about 12, 13, as young as possible.
As young as they can grasp the concept.
And I'm having the alcohol conversation. And a lot of people are like, no, alcohol's not a drug. No, have the alcohol conversation.
See, that's the
let's try to isolate. People try to isolate. Well, alcohol is this, and then marijuana is this. No. Let's put them all together. And let's have these conversations because they're all life changing.
Right. That's the problem. I remember, and Tyler, you might resonate with this. I can remember parents, even though I never went to parties. I remember parents. One family in particular lived out in the country. They welcomed high school kids to their house to get to party because their opinion was they're safer doing it here than they are anywhere else. So for some reason we've accepted alcohol as this okay thing to do, but you start talking weed, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
You start talking cocaine, no.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you alcohol's ruined a lot of lives.
Yes. More so than any, probably.
More so than any.
But yeah, man. So that's I didn't, have those conversations, and I totally regret it. And then I had my daughter came up, and you guys already know. I've already talked to her about the addiction problem that she had to oxycodone. What is it?
Oxycodone. Yeah.
Oxycodone.
The painkiller.
Yeah. And Oxycontin, and I had no idea. Like that's something that I grew up with. Okay, there was alcohol and there was marijuana, and that's pretty much it. I'm much older than you guys, so I didn't go through all the opioids and all that stuff. I didn't go through that process. I didn't see the pills. And my daughter came up, and that's what hit her was the Oxycontin. She got addicted to that, and I didn't have any conversations. I mean, I saw DJ go through the process, and I thought, oh, my daughter will be fine. I was not in front of it.
So genuine question, and this is by no means poke at you, to say you screwed up. None of that. You at the time were an NFL football player.
Right.
You were very immersed. I got to imagine you're very immersed in your career. You're very focused.
Actually, I had already retired.
Oh, you had retired.
I had already retired.
Well, but as they're growing up, though.
As they're growing up, yeah. As my son
whenever
growing
you
up,
said
yeah.
if you go back,
Yeah.
How when DJ was 10, what?
I'm having conversations, just preparing.
But I just mean, it's easy because I know it's easy for me to get so involved in what I'm doing at work.
Yeah.
I come home at 6:30, 7 o'clock, and my kids are about to go to bed. I poured nothing into my kid that day.
Yeah.
So how much of it had to do with the presence of mind that you had at that time for them during those developmental years?
Yeah, I don't know. I think part of it, man, was just the fact that I just didn't think it would ever happen to my kids because of the way how I dealt with it. You know, I just thought, they might at some point, but you know, by that time I'll be in front of it, and
Or I'll see the signs.
I'll see the signs. Yeah, I think the buddies they hang out with, I'll be able to tell, you know, if this and this happens. But it just, I was just living in my own world, man. I was so oblivious to what was really going on. And what was really going on, man, it would blow your mind when I actually found out how prevalent the drugs were. I mean, he's going to private schools. Kids got money. Then he went to a public school, which is one of the bigger public schools here in town where a lot of people got money. And the problem was outrageous. I mean, here in Plano, Texas, they had this, they call it the black tar.
Black tar heroin.
Yeah.
Yep.
And people were
weed
dying.
with it, right? Yeah.
Kids were dying because of it. And I was so oblivious to think, not my kids. It was right there in my backyard, man.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the part of it. Those are like, you have regrets in your life. Those are the regrets I had in my life. That I just wish I would have gotten from it and been informative, introduced them, showed them, you know, what the effects could possibly be. Tell them, you know, and have these conversations, like real conversations, face to face, around the table. And I think that's the way I should have approached it.
And here's the thing is I think as parents, we're afraid to bring it up because we don't want to introduce the idea to them if they're not ready for it, right? So we're hesitant to bring it up, and that's probably more my nature. But by us not doing that, not having that conversation early on, we now stigmatize that topic. So now if they are dealing with it or they do have a conversation, then the thought is, I know for me, I never would have talked to my parents. Like if I had a question that my friend brought up, I was afraid that my parents wouldn't let me hang out with that friend anymore because now that's so evil and we don't talk about it. It's that bad. Oh, you can't be around that person. That person's a bad influence. But if you normalize it, and I don't mean normalize it, but if you open up that conversation, now if they have a question, now they're comfortable enough to come talk to you about it. Hey, mom or dad, I heard this at school today. Is that true? Or is that accurate? Or how am I supposed to respond to this? Or can you help me through this? Because you've already opened up that conversation. And like Tiffany and I, well, Tiffany mainly, it's kind of the same thing with the sex conversation. Is Tiffany at 4 years old, I come home and she does this program with Gia, my oldest. And she literally I walk in and they're talking about like female anatomy parts that I'm not okay with my daughter at 4 years old saying out loud. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, I want her to hear the correct terminology. I want to educate her the right way so she doesn't go to school and some third grade boy says something to her and then she have no idea what it is and then think that it's something and then continue having this distorted image or perception of what it really is. I want to be able to teach my daughter that. I want to have those conversations. So she's totally changed my mindset in it because I think had it not been for Tiff, I'd have probably just kind of handled it like my parents, like, I'll see, you know, whatever. I'll
talk about it.
Yeah, no, like they're not going to, I'm going to teach them that it's, you know, it's wrong. We'll be like, oh, it's wrong. You're not going to do it. But if you don't open that conversation, then think about from a child's perspective is, well, it's not something that we talk about. So I can't bring it up if I have a question. I'll go to my friend at school and I'll ask them because they can talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, you said it's wrong. So let's dig in that a little bit. Because marijuana specifically, it feels like that's the easiest thing to get a hold of. I could be wrong about this, but
No,
you know, you're talking about your son. Well, yeah, alcohol. Alcohol too. But it's wrong. But what if it becomes legal? Then what's the definition of wrong? Mm-hmm. So how does that conversation change then?
You got to understand
if it is legal.
Look, the repercussions. I mean, I think the one thing you always have to talk about are the repercussions of. And I'll go back to what Tyler just said. My mother was very informative of everything. She showed us, like, hey, this is what happens if you do this, and this, right? If you get caught, you go to jail. If you do this, your life will change. If you become addicted, and I'm watching and I'm seeing this. So it's easier for me because I'm seeing the effects at a young age. And I'm like, I'm not going to do all that. That's not going to happen. So my kids, how I came about was we didn't have open conversations. We weren't at the dinner table just talking about things openly. There was no dialogue. One thing about my wife, and as you mentioned, your wife, Tiffany, my wife, Tiffany, one of the things I totally respect about her family, and I've told you guys this, they say anything. Like, they'll have conversations at the table, and I'm like, I can't believe you said that. This is not cool. Like, this is not a cool conversation. And they're going back and forth.
Why are you telling your dad about what we do in front of your dad? I'm sitting right here.
Yes. I'm like squeamish. Like, what the fuck? Black folks don't talk like this. But it's the same conversations that their parents, that Jeanette, her mom, and Eddie, her dad, had with her and her sister Courtney. Like, they were open conversations that allowed them to be informed about all topics, whether it be sex or drugs or whatever. And those are the conversations that we and you have little ones that you're going to have. Yeah. You got to open yourself up to that.
Yeah.
Because I think what's got to happen, right? That communication, those conversations, is because you have to set a baseline of what our family expectation is. Yeah. And like, okay, hey, here are the things that mommy and daddy believe. This is what, talking to little ones, this is what your mom and dad believe. This is how we feel about it. This is why, we've experienced this, we've experienced that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with talking to your kids about your history and your past. Especially failures. Yeah. Like, you don't have to be perfect to your kids. I think being transparent about things educates them, gives them the confidence to come ask you because, okay, now I actually knew. I didn't learn, and sorry, Dad, if you didn't want me to put this out there, but I didn't learn, literally, my parents, didn't do anything. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, they're perfect. Like, they never messed up. Right. I didn't learn until I was 34 years old that my dad smoked weed for like 10 years straight. And I didn't know that. I had no idea. Wow. And you would never guess it. But like, he lived in the Bay Area, California, and he was in junior college and was working, and it was just normal, right? But if you don't have those conversations and the family baseline isn't set, then you're just wandering aimlessly, right? And I think what you were saying is in culture, it is normalized, and it is becoming more normalized, right? You look at Oregon. The state of Oregon in February this year passed a law that decriminalized any illicit drugs. Wow. Now, if you have up to a certain amount, but if you've got crack, if you've got coke, if you've got meth, if you've got heroin, weed, doesn't matter. It's decriminalized. So that's a state that says, hey, look, we just had such a problem. We're just not gonna prosecute anybody anymore because it's so normal here. It's so they're like 20% above the national average as a state, right? And so, but now, I mean, you're in Texas, we're in Texas, and it is the most, I would say, as conservative anywhere in the country, and we're not far probably away from legalizing marijuana. I think we'll probably hang on for a while, but
that's coming.
But an hour north of us, it's legal in Oklahoma, which you could compare those states and say, hey, look, they're very similar from a political standpoint. So it's becoming more normal. So if you're letting culture, if you're letting government, if you're letting teachers, if you're letting other students set the baseline for your kid, they're going to be lost. They're not going to know what to understand. And look, every family is going to be different. But you've got to set that standard as the head of a household, whether it's split households or not. that conversation has to be had, or your kid is going to be influenced in a direction that you probably are not comfortable with.
Yeah. It maybe goes without said, but what are y'all's fears? Like, why is this such a big deal?
Addiction for me. Addiction, because I've seen addiction firsthand. I've seen uncles. I've seen my daughter go through this. And for me, it is a generational curse. And I don't want to get biblical on this, but this is drugs have, once I've actually done the research, it's been extremely prevalent in my family's life. My mother, I've never seen my mother to this day have a drink. And the reason why is because of her upbringing and the family members before her and her own brothers having addictions. I have 2 uncles that have died through addictions that were my mom's brothers. So she has started this process of educating us through, what our family looks like. For me, it runs in our blood. My daughter, who I felt like I would be the one that would break that, but it just passed along to her. She's battling every single day of her life. She's been sober for a number of years now, but it's a battle that she has to deal with. So addiction to me is by far one of my biggest fears.
And to elaborate on that, addiction, but I think our generation that's living right now is more susceptible to addiction than ever before. Why? Because we are always looking to escape. We're always looking for a way out. We're looking because we grind so hard and we do this and we chase it and we're ambitious and we're growing and we're doing this, but we are more reliant on artificial substances to fulfill us or to allow us to escape than ever before. So if we lean on alcohol, that can get real bad real fast, right? We rely on weed for an escape. Okay, well, we're going to need that escape more and more and more and more. And again, I have a very different perspective with marijuana than I did 10, 15 years ago. Right. But if it is used in the way that our culture right now is going, then that becomes a problem. Then it goes to opioids. Really, okay, hey, now I'm gonna take pills because I can take a Xanax and I can take an Oxy, or I can take a codeine, or I can take whatever it is, right? That we now are highly, highly, highly addictive. Or then we go to Coke, or we go whatever it is, right? Because we are always looking for an escape. Yeah. And that leads to addiction. That's what scares me the most.
And we're already seeing it now, man.
Oh,
we're seeing it so much, like
the
young
opioid
kids.
crisis. Like it's insane.
And it's the parents that are introducing. Oh, my son has anxiety, and man, what's the instant fix? Pharmacy.
Yeah,
go to the pharmacy. Take this. Instead of having conversations and maybe dealing with issues, we're drugging our kids up now.
But it's because as parents, again, this is a whole thing, right? You got pharma, you got this, you got like government, like you got all these issues. But reality is, when it comes down to it, as parents, that's easier because I don't have to change my life.
Yeah.
I'll just give him a quick fix because I'm not going to put in the work and I'm not going to put in the effort to fix him. And guess what? You know why I'm not going to put it in for my kid? Because I don't do it for myself. Because I'm just going to self-medicate. Because I don't want to have to actually go through the issue.
Yeah. Now that's a great transition to how I want to finish this. So we've established that starting these discussions early about the dangers and educating our kids early. That's going to be one of our game plans for how we're going to address this. Starting early. Don't wait for the signs, right? Start them 9, 10 years old so that they're ready going into those middle school days when inevitably they're going to be introduced to it. But what you guys are talking about right now is a good transition. How are you going to introduce to them healthier alternatives? So we talked about weed right now is being promoted as an anxiety relief, as a stress relief. And that's fine if you're 35 years old and and you're in a state where it's legal. Okay, great. Smoke weed if that's what you want to do. But for my 14-year-old in a state where it's not legal, what are some healthy alternatives that I can introduce to them?
Here we go. We're going to turn this on you.
Yeah.
I mean, you are the king of fitness in this room, right? Health.
Yeah.
What are some healthy alternatives that you would suggest?
I mean, physical fitness is number one above and beyond anything else, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's doing what I'm doing now, which is having a home gym. I'm not going to a gym somewhere else where my kids can't see me. It's have my own home gym, and I'm putting in the work every single day. Obviously for my mental health, my physical health, but guess what my 5-year-old does is he 5 yet?
No, he's
My
4.
4-year-old does every single morning.
You have another one.
Yeah. And I've got
You
another
haven't
one.
told us. Does Whit know?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
So what does my 4-year-old do every morning? First thing he does when he wakes up, he comes and he checks the garage. His daddy out there working out. That's the first thing he does every day. And so he's spending, never once do I tell him, hey, man, do some push-ups, or hey, man, do some squats. But he's hanging out with me.
Yeah.
We're in the gym together. He's seeing me work out and be physically active. Mm-hmm. Now, as he gets older, now the conversation is going to be much easier in introducing him to physical fitness because he's been seeing me do it his whole life.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be something that I'm going to have to talk to him about the benefits. He's just going to see it.
Yeah.
And again, the conversation is going to naturally flow. So for me, being physically active is a healthy alternative. If I'm feeling stressed, if I'm feeling anxious, that's one thing I can turn to. And so to me, that's one way that's a healthy alternative. What are some other healthy alternatives that you guys can think of?
I think healthy hobbies, right, is because typically when you're supplementing substances to fill something, right, it's because you're looking for either an escape or you're looking for joy, right? You're looking for an absence of something and you're looking to fill it with that. So fill it with something that brings you joy. So whether it's hiking, whether it's biking, whether it's reading, whether it's painting, I hate to say it, whether it's video games, right? Yeah. Like whatever it is that brings you some sort of joy. Because think about it. I know for me, okay, if I'm going to go hunting, okay, first of all, there's no way I'm drinking the night before. Second of all, like that's an entire day taken up, right? You fill it with productive time. So finding a hobby that brings you passion. And then also too, I think if you've got a purpose beyond yourself, that also helps. It's not just me. Like I look at my kids and I look at my wife and it's like, hey, very easily I could go smoke weed every day, right? Like, okay. Like I work all day and
used to be a song, smoke weed every day. Yeah. Every day.
Nate Dogg. But when a healthy alternative is just having purpose.
Yeah.
Because very few people in very few professions, I'm not saying nobody and I'm not saying no professions, but typically if you're under the influence of a substance, it's really hard to do better at your job, right? It's not typically a performance enhancer. Typically, there are some people, and you brought up the anxiety side of it, and here's me shifting gears mid thought. Is I do think that there's application for marijuana. I do, yeah. And I think legalizing it, just fully putting it on the streets, I don't know if that's the right way to do it. But I think making it acceptable for a medicinal use is it's smart. Because I have family members that have struggled with anxiety like crazy. My whole side of my family, which I didn't find out till later on in life, struggles terribly with anxiety. And doing it, whether it's a drop or it's an edible or whatever it may be, in the right dosage, under the right supervision, in the right circumstances, can add tremendous benefits. And now let's talk about, okay, the fact that it actually provides for the economy, right? The taxable revenue now that comes on it, it decriminalizes the things that, for people, and I'm not saying everybody, but for people that look, this isn't an issue. Like Susie May that has anxiety, that has 3 kids, that takes an edible but gets pulled over because she has an edible in her center console, should probably not go to jail.
Right.
Probably not. I mean, who knows, right?
Not.
Yeah. And and that's going down a discussion of.
But the point is look, there's a time and place for it, but there are so many healthy alternatives, and something. The purpose is like, look, I'm going to lead an example, and I'm going to live in a way that I can do with clear eyes, with a clear head, and I can make an impact on those people beyond myself. That to me should be enough of a deterrent to not let that take over your life.
Yes. I mean, some of the older people, again, if you want to turn to marijuana to relieve your anxiety, you're a fully functioning human being, go for it. But I'm not sure I want my 13-year-old thinking that
there's no 13-year-old. There's no 13-year-old that has the mental capacity to make a educated decision to say, you know what, I should probably do this because I've got anxiety.
Right.
Like, just like when if you are an adult, right, and you are making your own decisions, look, that's your choice. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to judge your sexual preference, your choice of substances. As long as it is healthy and not affecting other people, do what you got to do, right? But like, no 13-year-old, no 15-year-old, no 16-year-old should be able to make that decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, so we talk about healthy alternatives. We said physical fitness. I liked what you said, Tyler, finding a hobby. Another one that I like is service.
That's exactly where I was going to go if you would have let me.
So go.
Can I get mine?
Yeah.
I'm
Can
not going
I
to steal
give
your
you
thunder.
mine?
Go ahead.
I would say run to it, not away from it. My daughter went through an addiction, went through a rehab. One of the best things that I've seen come out of it is that even through that process, when she was getting out, they hired her and brought her back in to work with those that were addicted. And I've seen people in their programs that bring their own kids in who've never had an addiction problem and serve and see those who are going through these issues. You know what? The way you can combat that is just you actually visually allow someone to serve those that are going through an addiction issue.
Yeah.
Don't run from it. Don't always have to look for a healthy way out. Show them with your own eyes, and have them be of service to those that are going through these issues. That's how you learn. Mm-hmm. That's how you get a better understanding of what's taking place. But I would absolutely say serve. And it doesn't have to be just serving someone with an addiction issue. Just serve, period. That can be your form of giving, or not just giving, but a form of getting away.
Stress relief.
Or stress
anxiety.
Relief and a release that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is broaden that service mentality of, like you said earlier, Tyler, it's having that awareness of a purpose bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
And when you're serving people, you're working towards a purpose bigger than yourself.
Yes.
It takes you away from that micro mindset of my anxiety, my depression, my fears, and puts a little perspective in your day. Mm-hmm. And because you're serving those that are less fortunate more so. To your point, Darren, maybe it's as specific as serving those who are addicted, but maybe it has nothing to do with addiction. It's serving the homeless shelter, serving a food shelter.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with it, but it's giving you perspective and helping with your anxiety that way.
Yeah.
That's a much healthier alternative than turning to the.
Yeah.
Look, we're not going to solve this in 45 minutes. This is a discussion.
I feel like we did.
Well, maybe we did. This is a discussion that each of us, we all have.
We get paid for this?
4 or 5 year old kid. Can you let me finish?
I'm just saying, we just want to get paid for this, dude. We're giving out some
gold
here.
Some gold. But we all have 4 and 5 year old kids. This is going to be a discussion we're going to have for years to come. Mm-hmm. And I just hope that people listening to this are encouraged. This is going to be on the forefront of my mind of starting discussions early, hopefully introducing them to healthier alternatives.
Yeah.
There is some element of, hey, you just got to let it be what it is. Your kid is probably going to do what their personality says they're going to do.
Yeah.
Because, Darren, you just said it earlier, you were told and shown everything you could, and you still tried it.
Right.
So even if they still try it, you got to set the base level, the foundation, hopefully that you're giving yourself a better chance of success.
Yeah. But I think part of it is other topics that we've talked about, right? Being present and knowing your kid and really understanding, okay, hey, what are they going for? Because each one is going to be different. I know my 4 kids, every single one of them is going to be different.
Yeah.
Like I know my youngest, Sia, she is going to be the toughest of all of them.
She's going to require a different approach than Luca.
Totally. Whereas like my oldest, we could talk to her about this, and she's like, okay, you're right. And she'll go to her friends and like, guys, we can't do, this is the right way to do it. And she'll like be an advocate about doing the right thing. Whereas Sia's be like, oh, you told me I can't do it? Oh, watch this.
Me.
Hold my beer.
Yeah, hold my beer.
That's a
I know,
great point.
I'm telling
That's
you.
a great point, is having a specific
Yeah.
approach for each,
Yeah.
not just thinking one broad brush approach is going to work on all of them.
Right.
You
With
gotta
her, she's going to be locked
factor
in a closet until she's 26. So that's my approach.
And be intentional, man.
Yeah.
As a parent, just be intentional with, the introduction and talking and having open conversations. Again, I think one of my biggest issues and the reason why, my kids had gone down, that path is because I just didn't have open conversations. You got to have open conversations.
We appreciate you guys. If this is something that you're going through right now, maybe you've got an 11, 12, 13-year-old kid at home, and there's an approach that you found that's really worked well with you, let us know. We'd love to hear. We're always looking to learn. Share this with your friends. Subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. We've got a YouTube channel. We say this every week. Like and subscribe there. We appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of the week.